Producing oil and gas pushes the limits of offshore engineering to its limits, and key members of that workforce are commercial divers. But deep sea diving is a hazardous activity, and every year there are numerous accidents sustained by recreational and commercial divers. This video chronicles one of the most gruesome accidents in oil history, the Byford Dolphin diving disaster. But before we go on, some of the content in this video may be distressing, so viewer discretion is advised before you watch this video. On 5th of November 1983, divers were working on the Byford Dolphin, a semi-submersible drilling rig operated by the drilling company Dolphin Drilling. A semi-submersible drilling rig is a floating platform that travels from location to location to conduct drilling operations. The divers on board the Byford Dolphin were working in a pressurised working habitat called a saturation spread. Deep-sea commercial diving is a complex operation. At greater depths, decompression sickness, or the bends as it is commonly known, causes significant problems for commercial divers. And it's all down to something called Boyle's Law. So stay with me whilst we do a little bit of physics. As you go deeper in water, the pressure due to the water above you increases by 1 bar or 14.5 pounds a square inch for every 10 metres or 33 feet you descend. And this has an effect on gases you breathe. Imagine a balloon filled with air at the surface. If you go down 10 metres, then the pressure increases by 1 bar and the size of the balloon is half its original size. The deeper you go, the higher the pressure, and the smaller the size of the balloon. At 50 metres water depth, or 164 feet, which is the realistic limit for recreational scuba diving, the size of the balloon will be just 1/6 of the size of the balloon at the surface. Going the other way, if you fully filled a balloon at 50 metres, by the time it got to the surface, it would be 6 times bigger, or more likely will have burst. It is this expansion of gas that causes problems for divers. At deeper water depths, the pressure of the air breathed in by divers increases, and more nitrogen dissolves into the tissues. The longer a diver remains at depth, the more nitrogen dissolves. Unlike oxygen, which is used up by the body, the nitrogen gas is not utilised by the body and builds up over time in body tissues. As a diver swims to the surface, the pressure decreases and the nitrogen which has dissolved in tissues wants to leave the body. If a diver surfaces too fast, the excess nitrogen will come out rapidly as gas bubbles, much like the bubbles in a can of fizzy drink. The gas bubbles can make their way through the body to vital organs, which can cause sickness and even death. To combat the effects of decompression sickness, during deeper dives, the divers would need to make decompression stops as they ascend, to allow time for the nitrogen to escape from the body gradually. However, the deeper the dive, the more time these decompression stops take. This makes decompression stops for deep-sea commercial diving operations very inefficient. The solution to the problem for commercial divers is through the use of saturation diving. The divers live under pressure in a saturation spread, a hyperbaric environment on the surface for the duration of the project. Throughout the dive campaign, the bodies of the divers remain saturated with nitrogen, hence the name. The spread consists of a dry pressurised chamber, pressurised to the equivalent water depth where the divers will be working. A diving bell is used to get from the chamber to the working location. The divers can live in the spread for days or even weeks at a time. Saturation diving allows for greater economy of work and enhanced safety for divers. The habitat is compressed slowly to the working pressure only once at the beginning of the work period, and decompressed to surface pressure once at the end. However, unplanned exposure to normal atmospheric pressures will quickly result in severe sickness and death. On the Byford Dolphin, The saturation spread had been located on the main deck of the drilling rig. The spread consisted of a central chamber, Chamber 1, which is partially hidden on this photo, and had a recreational space and an area that gained access to the diving bell. Chamber 2 was connected to Chamber 1 via an airlock, and included the beds where the divers slept. A third smaller chamber gave access to the hyperbaric lifeboat, which was a special pressurised lifeboat used by divers in an emergency if they needed to evacuate from the rig. The diving bell was connected to Chamber 1 via trunking, and was secured in place with a clamp. On the day of the accident, the rig was drilling in the Frigg field in the Norwegian sector of the North Sea. 4 divers were in the saturation chamber. 2 British divers, Edwin Coward and Roy Lucas, were resting in Chamber 2 on their bunks. 2 Norwegian divers had just been winched up after a dive. Bjorn Bergersen was in the recreational space in Chamber 1, whilst Truls Hellevik was closing the door that led to the trunking which connected to the diving bell. Outside of the chambers were 2 tenders, William Crammond and Martin Saunders. The inside of the chambers were at a pressure of 9 bar or 130 pounds a square inch. Due to miscommunication, before Hellevik was able to close the door to the chamber, Crammond mistakenly opened the clamp that was keeping the trunk sealed, with devastating consequences. The chamber instantly decompressed from 9 atmospheres to the ambient external pressure in the blink of an eye. Air rushed out of the chamber with tremendous force, jamming the interior trunk door and pushing the bell away, striking the 2 tenders outside. Crammond was killed, while Saunders was severely injured. But what happened to the 4 occupants of the chamber was even worse. Inside the chamber, Coward, Lucas and Bergersen were exposed to the effects of explosive decompression and died instantly, their blood boiling. Hellevik, who was close to the partially open trunk door, was forced through the narrow opening and his body was ripped apart. His internal organs were scattered across the deck of the rig, and part of his spine was found 30 feet above the chamber in the drilling derrick. The official investigation into the accident by the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, NPD, concluded that the accident was caused by human error on the part of the dive tender who opened the clamp. However, crew members from the Byford Dolphin and the unions claimed this was a cover-up and completely ignored the fact that there was no interlock system installed to prevent the clamp being removed while still under pressure. This was something that was required on newer systems, but the spread installed on Byford Dolphin was an old design, and NPD had given dispensation for the deficient system to be used. But 26 years later, in 2008, it was finally acknowledged that the root cause of the accident was indeed down to this deficient engineering design, and the families of the divers eventually received compensation from the Norwegian government, finally bringing closure to the victims' families. And that concludes the gruesome tale of the Byford Dolphin diving disaster. If you have found this video enlightening, please like and subscribe to my channel, and leave any comments on what you think about this accident below. Thank you very much for watching.